So, at the moment, you should be having a really good think about this concept of the information society. It's fundamental for the subject, and it's the primary focus for your first assessment item. So, you want to get a good grasp of the concept. What is it? How do we define it? How can you look at a country and say, yep, that's an information society? And that's important because that's what you're going to be doing in that first assignment. You're going to be trying to move from a conceptual, theoretical position to a more real world situation. So you're going to be applying the concept to a particular example. For most of you, that'll be Australia. So you want to be able to think about how you might apply some sort of evidence base in trying to respond to the question in the assignment. So in the subject material, we start out by looking at the work of Fritz Machlup and Mark Porat, who after the post-war period in the 20th century, they looked at the US economy and they tried to analyse the contribution of information and knowledge to the US economy. So that's a pretty good starting point. That's a good way of initially thinking about what we're trying to do here in terms of exploring the role of information in society in more concrete terms. So we've got that economic perspective. How does information, how does knowledge contribute to the national economy? Through your readings, you'll have seen the name Manuel Castells pop up. So Castells is a big thinker in this area, and he tends to think a little more in terms of networks. So he moves into a more globalized perspective and explores how global networks of communications impact on society through the flows of capital, so money, finance, products, and ideas. Okay, so through the flows that are facilitated by that communications infrastructure. So, if you want some examples of what I'm talking about, think about ordering something online and how you use online services. And often, when you think about it, what you're doing is purchasing services and goods that are in some way intangible. So, if you think about a product like Skype, which is a great product, and often free, but there are pay versions for more advanced performance. So Skype is free, but it's a good example of e-commerce and e-business where you've got a product there that delivers a service, and it's the service that you ultimately pay for. Also think about ordering products online and where they come from and the impact that has. So if you go out to buy a new shirt, you might go down to your local Kmart and buy a shirt, or you could hop online and order a shirt from elsewhere, and the elsewhere might be Sydney, but it also might be Hong Kong, or it might be New York. So if you think about the impact of that, what we're seeing is at a very individualized level interaction with a global economy. So national economies are essentially fusing together to create a very globalized economy and a very globalized information environment. So Castells focuses on that globalization and the network effect in facilitating that process of globalization. And I also mentioned the flow of ideas that are facilitated by the network, and there's some really good examples of that over the last year or so. We take the Arab Spring, where we saw a rippling of social unrest across North Africa and the Middle East, and a lot of the unrest, a lot of those social movements were facilitated by communications technologies, to some extent by online social networking platforms, Facebook, Twitter, but probably more predominantly by mobile phone communication. But the point is that communications infrastructure has had a significant social impact in those regions. It's bypassed some of the national state infrastructure to create a kind of grassroots, bottom-up movement that has brought about to varying extents political and social change. And it's not just in developing economies, developing societies that we can see this kind of impact. If you look at the Occupy Wall Street movement that's evolved into a kind of international Occupy movement, a lot of that has been facilitated by online environments, online communications environments. So these are the kinds of social impacts that are facilitated by networks that Castells would write about, and other people like Clay Shirky, who's a big name again. And the other kind of theorist that I wanted to mention, and I've cited one of his papers for you in the reading list, is Barry Wellman. So Barry Wellman was talking about social networks long before Facebook. So he was thinking there in terms of how society organises itself around our individual social networks, and as we move into a more distributed form of social networking using communications technologies and social media, we see social impacts there. And it's not necessarily the technology that's forcing the change. There are other changes, so a lot of geographic mobility, a lot of immigration, and a lot of extended networks of family and friends that are held together by online environments like Facebook. And I'm a prime example of that. So I'm living overseas, and my family and friends from back home I keep in touch with on Facebook all the time. So those are different perspectives that we can take on thinking about the information society. So we talked about economic perspective, contribution to national economy. We talked about the impact of the network, globalization. We talked about social networks, extended social networks. And these are all features of the information society. So these are all elements that you might look for in trying to establish the extent to which we're dealing with an information society in particular contexts. So in the assignment, you're going to be trying to apply some of these definitional terms and ideas to Australia, unless you're one of our overseas students and you've asked me if you can look in another country, and that's fine to do, by the way. But if we start thinking about Australia, because that's what the majority of you are going to be exploring, let's have a think about government policy. Now, the phrase digital economy crops up in government policy all the time now. It's a really significant strand of the policy agenda from the Labour government through both the Rudd and Gillard terms. To the extent that we have a specific government department, the Department for Broadband Communications and the Digital Economy. So we've got a whole government department dealing specifically with this area. So that was implemented by the Rudd government. So ask yourself, what does that tell us about the policy direction of the current Australian government? Where are they leading us? What sort of society, what sort of economy do they envisage? What are they trying to facilitate here? We've got a national broadband network that's being rolled out across the country in order to um, improve the communications infrastructure. But beyond that, it's to create a platform that will allow for a number of other significant developments around health, around education, around commerce. So I should suggest at this point that you have a good look at the website of the Department for Broadband Communications and the Digital Economy, and specifically at the site of the National Broadband Network, in order to get your head around where this policy direction is leading. What's it all about? Where's it going? Okay, making sense, I hope. So that's the main question you got to ask yourself. What sort of society, what sort of economy are the current Australian government trying to encourage? Okay, where are these policy initiatives taking Australia? Okay. Now, what I'll do is I'll follow up on this discussion by circulating through the forum some resources that I'd like you to have a look at, that I think will give you some evidence base to work on. So I'm going to circulate a couple of data sets from the Australian Bureau of Statistics that explore the broadband take-up in Australia and the use of computers across Australia. I'm also going to look at I'm also going to ask you to look at a couple of policy documents from the government around the digital economy and the digital education revolution. Now, I don't expect you to wade through 50, 100 pages of some government policy document, but I really do think it's important that you at least read the executive summary, maybe the introduction, get a good grip on where Australian government policy is leading the country. And the importance of all this is that if you're making strategic decisions around where your information service or where your organisation is heading, you need to have some understanding of the broader social, political, economic context in order to make informed strategic decisions. So I hope that gives you something to go on. I hope it clarifies some of the definitional issues for you. We can follow up with discussion on the forum, and again, you can contact me direct if you want to discuss any of these ideas further. Okay.